For the longest time, the Horde was trapped in a perpetual cycle of allying with incredibly brutal or vile creatures for the purposes of destroying their mutual enemies. On a few occasions, this very much boiled down to the enemy of my enemy is my friend, with the forest trolls of Zulaman, of the northern part of the Eastern Kingdoms, being the prime example of this. The Ogres, Death Knights, Deathwing, and even for a short time during the First War, Demons of the Burning Legion were all malefic forces that the Horde united with during their tenure as an invading army. Then the lethargy after the Second War hit. The Horde needed to shake itself from its apathy and depression. Thrall's leadership, reuniting with the Frostwolves in Warsong, and the return to shamanism was a real change for the better within the soul of the Orcish Horde, and exactly what it needed. However, they were out of all their allies, nevertheless setting sail for Kalimdor to see what tomorrow held for them. The Darkspear Trolls were a spiritually inclined and agile race that quickly dedicated themselves to the leadership of Thrall, but that still left them without the heavy-hitting bruisers that the Ogres provided during Doomhammer's leadership. Sure, the Wolf Riders had returned, and Orcs in and of themselves stood up incredibly well in a fight, but neither could withstand a potent night charge or the bile-infused and lumbering swings of the immense abominations. That is, until an ancient Tauren chieftain named Cairn had a chance encounter with the young war chief, and the destinies of both peoples changed forever. Welcome to Ancient Lore, a discussion series where we peel back the layers of world building and story to examine, understand, and discuss where we came from in the World of Warcraft. Today's topic is the history of the Tauren Tribes and how they were underused and underappreciated by Blizzard. And as always, if you have any comments or questions, feel free to leave them in the comments section below or connect with me on my Discord. While this piece will be focusing specifically on the Tauren and the Tribes of Mulgore in Warcraft 3 and World of Warcraft Vanilla, we will also be at least mentioning a few points through Cataclysm. However, bringing up the absolutely ridiculous interactions between Anduin Wrynn and Bane Bloodhoof, or even mentioning Tauren Paladins or any kind of secret cow level, and you'll be booted so swiftly from the comments section that you'll assume one of us figured out planes running and had a fair bit of distance before you got a hoof to the backside. I'd sooner believe that Tauren rogues exist, which they don't, and no amount of screenshots of Koi will convince me otherwise. As I mentioned in my slightly too long intro, the Tauren were originally introduced in the early parts of the Orc campaign for Warcraft 3. Immensely strong and sturdy, these bullmen wielded massive carved totems that represented their tribe, with the exception of the chieftains. Tribal leaders, the chieftains strapped even more massive totems to their backs and swung immense halberds at their foes, large enough to slice anything not as muscle-bound and girthy as a Kodo clean in half. Despite this, their numbers had dwindled, hunted to the extremes of survival by unending waves of furious and vile centaurs, and required the aid of Thrall and his Orcish Horde to return to their ancestral homeland of the Great Plains of Mulgore. These first few missions with the Tauren really helped set a tone for the Orcish campaign as a whole, and while the Darkspear were the first race to join with the Orcs, the Tauren and their blood oath not only created a lot more meaning within the story, but also established much more of where the Horde's moral compass was and where it was starting to point towards. While being immensely powerful and furious warriors, Tauren were also incredibly honorable, respected nature and the world around them, and embraced the peace and serenity of their Earth Mother whenever called to do so. In many ways, they were a polar opposite of what the Horde was in previous wars, when the Orcs were rabid and bloodthirsty raiders, powerful but fueled by hatred and demonic blood with no honor or peace to speak of. This clash of culture, the restraint that the Tauren showed in regard to their own strength, and even the calm and patient demeanor that radiated from Cairn at every step was not only refreshing, but also created this incredible ocean of potential for World of Warcraft to expound upon with the Tribes of Mulgore. As a heads up, I do speculate to a very minor extent when speaking on the tribes. However, this is very limited and done for the purposes of emphasizing certain aspects of the individual peoples of the Earth Mother. As a general overview of Tauren society, a tribe is made up of related family members, usually with specific jobs or tasks that they handle on a daily and/or weekly basis. Family units work and travel together, making choices on where to live and how to use resources as a group instead of as individuals. Leadership is usually based on age or experience, with almost every tribe having an elder or chieftain, but not both. The elder or chieftain will often make choices for a tribe, but not before discussing the choice with the members and getting thoughts and feedback. The best tribal leaders will often source solutions to troubles from their members instead of coming up with them themselves. Using the great Kodo beast that they tame, a tribe can easily deconstruct their settlement, pack it up, and move elsewhere when they feel the need arises, based on their nomadic culture when they roamed the barrens and elsewhere to live off the land. Spiritually, the Tauren worship their goddess and creator, the Earth Mother. Tauren traditions dictate that the Earth Mother is present in all things and all life, and respecting life, the earth, and nature is a vital part of how they show reverence to their creator. The sun and larger moon of Azeroth, Anshe and Musha, respectively, are said to be the eyes of the Earth Mother, ever watchful over her children, with the smaller blue moon said to be the tear of the Earth Mother, shed over the corruption of so many of the Tauren, called Losho. The Shuhalo, or Tauren's own word for themselves, believe that the Earth Mother sacrificed herself to protect her children from the shadows and corruption of the old gods. Almost every Tauren does whatever they can to be closer to nature and live in harmony with the world around them in order to have a stronger tie to the Earth Mother and her love. The individual tribes, due to their familial nature and generally tight social ties on daily life, usually have something that makes them stand out amongst the other tribes. Let's go through them now. The Bloodhoof tribe was the original tribe that the Horde encountered shortly after landing on Kalimdor. Chieftain Cairn Bloodhoof quickly became a staunch ally of the Orcs after they helped the Tauren secure Mulgore. It was the Bloodhoof that established an early Thunder Bluff settlement and began gathering the tribes to it. While the Bloodhoof are powerful warriors in their own right, a lot of their familial time and effort has been dedicated to leading the tribes and contributing warriors and healers to the Horde. It should be noted that Cairn Bloodhoof was the first High Chieftain of the tribes, a role that highlights how effectively he united the tribes and the nation he built through those efforts. Next up are the tribes that dedicated themselves to the study of druidic practices and maintained membership with the Cenarian Circle alongside the Kaldori. Most people will instantly recognize the Rune Totem, led by the venerable Elder Hamul Rune Totem, but most people don't remember the Mist Runners or the Wildmane, additional tribes that work out across Kalimdor to venerate the Earth Mother and protect the natural order of the world. All three tend to work in tandem to forward the goals of both the Tauren and Cenarian Circle. I'm going to note here that, while the Night Elves are exceptionally prideful about their state as the druids of the world, it was the Shuhalo that were the first and strongest druids on Azeroth, taught by Cenarian himself. Eat it, pointy-eared nerds! The religious leaders of the Tauren, some of the most powerful practitioners of shamanism, second only to Thrall himself, are the Sky Chasers. Peaceful, incredibly in tune with the elements of Azeroth, and potently wise, the Sky Chaser tribe was dedicated to the wellness of the tribes both in body and spirit. They were also integral members of the Earthen Ring alongside trolls and orcs, and were a minor player in bringing the Forsaken into the Horde. During a later uprising by the malefic Grimtotem, they were unfortunately slaughtered down to nearly the last member, another hallmark of the mistakes Blizzard made with Cairn and the Tauren. They were replaced by the Cloudsong tribe. Speaking of the Grimtotem, they stand out as the only tribe to not join the United Tribes of Thunder Bluff, but also as a minor antagonistic force across Kalimdor. They have traditionally allied with other antagonistic or destructive forces, or simply made trouble by trying to play different peoples off one another. led by the Elder Crone Magatha Grimtotem, they've generally been the Tauren but bad characters throughout much of the levels 1 through 40 experience in World of Warcraft. In my personal opinion, their writing is mushy at best, and their existence generally makes no sense. Magatha's manipulations of Garrosh and her uprising after the death of Cairn was a ridiculous and poorly scripted capstone on an existence that generally did not add anything to the world. What did add to the world are the many tribes that maintain trainers and craftsmen. For the tribes, there's a lot, so I'm going to rapid fire through them. The Rage Totem are well known for being the strongest and fastest warriors, and maintain trainers in Thunder Bluff alongside the Thunderhorn, who are some of the best hunters in all of Kalimdor. As a side note, on more than one occasion, I've mistaken the Thunderhorn tribe for the Thunderlord clan, which makes no sense. The Dawnstrider tribe maintains some shaman trainers, as well as possesses some of the most skilled enchanters available to the Tauren, and near to them in Thunder Bluff are the Winterhoof, incredible herbalists and alchemists. Also set up in Thunder Bluff, you have the Stonehoof, skilled smiths and exceptional miners dedicated to extracting resources from the earth without harming nature. And lastly, you have the Darkmane, general tradesmen and crafters that reside throughout Kalimdor. There are also a few tribes where we don't know as much about, or details are generally hazy. Those tribes are the Eagle Talon, Skyseer, Wheathoof, White Cloud, Wild Runner, Wind Totem, and Young Hoof. We see these tribes spread across Kalimdor sporadically, doing odd jobs or simply living their lives as proud peoples of the Earth Mother, wanting nothing more than to continue their daily work in peace. All of them, from Cairn down to the youngest bull, were ridiculously underappreciated by Blizzard. Cairn Bloodhoof himself was disgustingly underutilized by World of Warcraft story until he was unceremoniously killed off-screen, mind you. They didn't even have the courage to kill him off with an in-game event or some kind of cinematic, nothing like what Vol'jin received when he died and made Sylvanas war chief. This still stings, as it's one of the worst mistakes that Blizzard's story department has ever made. Cairn Bloodhoof, one of the oldest Tauren and the first High Chieftain of the tribes, had at most 3 quests, if you include the achievement to raid Thunderbluff and kill him. One of the greatest warriors on all of Kalimdor, a giant of a Tauren, and immeasurably wise. And he was entirely ignored for any quest or objective through the latter half of Vanilla, all of TBC, and all of Wrath, until he was killed off. As someone who played a Tauren from 2005 through when I quit playing retail towards the midpoint of Battle for Azeroth, this continues to be a sore spot for me. This is more than just one Tauren being ignored, though. More than anything, in Vanilla and the first 2 expansions, the only tribe that had literally any story development was the Grimtotem. And most of that was to make them into some kind of antagonist. Sometimes the writing is okay for them, but as I mentioned earlier, by and large, it's not cohesive or meaningful. Otherwise, we see a touch of activity from the Rune Totems and their attempts to heal the Barons from the mistakes of the Cenarian Circle and what they did in Wailing Caverns, and the Tauren Druids are somewhat involved in what happens in Silithus against the Karaji, but besides that, pretty much nothing. More than anything, the point that I'm getting at is, early on in the history of World of Warcraft, the Tauren were criminally underappreciated. Cataclysm brought abrupt and unwanted change, and story-wise, put the Tauren in this very weird and back-and-forth spot as a peaceful but dedicated arm of the Horde. How Bane Bloodhoof was written, with his ridiculous back-and-forth with Anduin Wrynn, as well as the introduction of Tauren paladins and priests, only made this worse. These changes and updates threw away so much of what the Tauren were: the immensely powerful, strong, but peaceful naturalists, the leadership, the wisdom, all in the trash can along with Cairn. While this may sound like me just being bitter, it comes from a place of hope that private servers like Turtle, Epoch, and others can right this grave injustice done to the most noble and proud of peoples. Not only would shining a light on the Shu'halo give them the attention they deserve, but it would also allow the lore of the Horde and the Tauren to be built out in a much more meaningful and less nonsensical kind of way. In a future episode, we'll cover other peoples and cultures, including the old allies of the Horde, the Amani Trolls, as well as the lesser-known lore of the Dwarves. We close this book of Warcraft history here, and save the rest for another time. If you've enjoyed this feature, please consider subscribing here at youtube.com/TheDanNation, as well as joining my Discord at tinyurl.com/Danscord. It's a Discord, but with 100% more Dan. A big thank you to Turtle Wow, where most of the visual footage you see during this episode was recorded at, as well as having provided the backing track for this piece. An additional thank you to those of you who have signed up for memberships here at YouTube. Your support is greatly appreciated. From the Lore Bunker in Boston, Massachusetts, this is Dan wishing you a wonderful and wide world of lore.